CISO in the web pages of ISMS Forum and INCIBE. I'm going to present now the speakers of this panel. On the right, I have Cristina Cañete, Chief of Information Security Office of CASER. Then we have Solé Pascual, Chief of Information Security Officer at Caixabank. On the left, I have Beatriz Soto, Chief of Information Security Officer at CASER, at INCIBE, sorry. And then we have Pablo López, second head of the Cybersecurity Department at CCN, and Francisco Lázaro, Chief of Information Security Officer at Renfe. So this white paper started from an idea of ISMS Forum, and the aim of creating a white paper that could work as a reference document for both for for experienced and new CISOs. So these are some guidelines that can be used in organizations, and also this helps organizations to organize this type of position, because it's true that sometimes we think that CISOs are not very well defined, that the role of this position is not very well defined. So the objective of this paper, we've created our first edition, and we hope we continue creating more editions, but we wanted to take into account the work and experiences of many members, many experienced members of the association. And well, we've been working on these projects for many months, and Alberto Hernández has been one of the leaders. Francisco Lázaro also has contributed to this white paper, and also myself. And we've also had several collaborators with their experience and their ideas, their perspectives. Ángel Campillo, Carles Solé, Carlos Alberto Saiz, Daniel Argacha, Elena Matilla, Gema Deler, Gonzalo Asensio, Gustavo Lozano, Iván Sánchez, Javier Sevillano, Jesús Mérida, José Ramón Moleón, José Antonio Perea, Manuel Fernández, Marcos Gómez, Mariano Benito, Pedro Díaz, Rafael Santos, Rafael Hernández, Ramón Ortiz, Roberto Barata. And the revision tasks have been developed by Alfonso López Escolar, Elena Matilla, and Gustavo Lozano. Well, you can see the list on the screen, but as you can see, it includes more of the reference CISOs in the cybersecurity community. And this is why this white paper has this tremendous value. Now I'm going to start asking questions to our speakers. I'm going to start with Beatriz. Beatriz, why was this a need, having a white paper about CISOs? From INCIBE, we wanted to have a first approach to the roles and responsibilities that CISOs have. We are focused on cybersecurity, both for business and citizens. We all usually receive feedback from companies regarding how this position is organized, but it's true that we didn't have a first written approach to professionalize this type of position. Paco Lázaro has been one of the authors, one of the coordinators of this paper. You, as CISO, what did you think we were lacking? Well, there is a compilation of regulations, and also it was very important for us to agree on terminology used. For example, and also the roles on the functions of the CISOs were not well defined. So we met together some CISOs to discuss what were the usual functions or roles of CISOs. And it's true that now more and more people are starting to work in different companies. This position is more and more needed in companies, and these people also need some support. And this is why we wanted to deliver a document that could be helpful for these people. And also we want the legislators to have some documents, some reference documents. For example, now when legislators or regulators are tried to transpose the ENISE, they have also needed to take a look at this type of documentation. I remember that in Madrid we had Ron Collet. We had a visit of Ron Collet, the author of the reference book about CISO, and he was saying that in 2018 this position had already had to be defined in organizations. Do you think this is still the case? Pablo, what do you think? When you are interviewing CISOs regarding critical infrastructures, etc., do you think we still have this lack of definition of the position, as Ron Collet was mentioning? Well, I think that we have a problem of maturity here, because when we are talking about cybersecurity, the key of cybersecurity is the implementation of measures from the organizational and technical point of view. So we have to think about the maturity of this position, and this is why we need to have someone responsible of cybersecurity. And in the end, when you reach a level of maturity, when a company reaches a level of maturity, you cannot. You need to have some regulatory framework, some certain positions that take responsibilities to implement security measures. So are we still in the same situation as in 2008? No, of course the situation has changed, but now companies have such a maturity level that they need to have this type of positions in their organization. And this is something that cannot be discussed. Thank you, Pablo. From the point of view of responsibilities, regarding the definition of the role and terminology, Eva, as CISO at Caser, what do you think? Well, I agree with what Pablo is saying. I think companies lack of maturity in this sense, and they need to work on that. And I can explain my experience in Caser. I started working in the technology area, in systems and communications, and I was in charge of providing this type of security regarding infrastructures, systems, technology. And we then started having a more strategic approach, and we created the figure of the CISO to lead this type of security measures. If companies do not have this type of figure of positions, they are not going to be able to deal with the security challenges that nowadays world that are raising in nowadays world. According to the latest Gartner's report, 50% of organizations worldwide have already CISOs reporting to CIOs. This has some advantages, some disadvantages. Eva, what's your opinion? Well, once again, I'm going to come back to my experience. Who are you reporting to? So, our security department is an independent department, but we report to an intermediary department that reports to the CIO. This has a lot of advantages, as the white paper is saying. One of the main advantages is that we are very closely positioned next to the technology department, and they can accept better our work, because sometimes there is a conflict between technology departments and security departmts. But on the other hand, you need to have the support of an authority, and in CASER we lack that. We lack of that. So in CASER, what we've done is to have a more flexible hierarchical structure. Even though I do not report directly to the CIO, I belong to the same governance bodies as the CIO. So I'm a member of the committee, of this type of committees, and they listen to our opinion and the security strategies we want to implement. Regarding Caixabank, Carles, how does it work for you? So we report the CIO from a couple of years. We've changed that a couple of years ago. Before, we used to report to the CIO, because in CaixaBank, high management, since the beginning, established security as a priority. There is a cascade organization that takes into account security. But it's true that regulators sometimes are the ones that establish this division of roles, so that there is also some type of independence. And this is something we must work on, because it's true that even though you are not in the same department at the IT department, we depend a lot on that. We have a 360 degrees perspective, and in order to have this perspective, we need to count on the CIO and the technology department. So it's very important to have that there is a good relation between these departments. So even though there is this division in an organizational way, we need to have this connection. We have seen also that we have CISOs as a service, which means, what's your opinion about this? Do you think that this is going to become a trend? Does it have an added value, or is it a problem? Well, taking into account the definitions that we've tried to convey in the white paper, the CISO must be an employee of the company, for sure, because this person is going to hold some responsibilities. CISOs as a service can also add an extra value, because these positions in some companies are not going to be needed 100% of the time. This works better for SMEs company, and this CISOs as a service are going to be like support figures for the main CISOs of companies. And these professionals are going to be able to help the position of the company in a strategic point of view. I would like to ask this question to Pablo too. CISO as a service is something that, what do you think about this figure? Can this have an added value? Can this be a threat? Well, I agree with Carles. The responsibility should never be delegated to a CISO as a service. But it's true that sometimes when executing your daily activities, you need to count on all the resources you have. If your company does not have this type of resources, you can use a CISO as a service. But cannot delegate these functions to this type of figure. You need to have a security department in your office that is in charge of analyzing risks, etc. You cannot delegate this task as a CISO, but you can count on partners, advisors, etc. that are going to help you do your job in the best way possible. And this is where the figure of the CISO can play a role. But we must take into account that you cannot give full responsibilities to CISOs as a service. Exactly. Beatriz, cybersecurity is very trendy right now. Well, it's very needed. This is why it's trendy. But what about CISO? Well, not that much, but it's true that companies are more and more aware that this position is needed. It's true that maybe this position is the role of this position is distributed between different employees, but in the end, we all, even though this becomes trendy or not, companies will have to understand that this is very important in their companies. Well, there are some analysts that say that by 2020, more than 25% of organizations will have a Chief of Information Security Officer or a Cybersecurity Officer. Do you think that's real? Do you think the figure is real? Besides, I still know a lot of companies that do not have this type of position covered. Well, I repeat again that even though you have a lot of regulations and governance and legal frameworks, if you don't implement security measures, you are going in the wrong direction. So companies that do not have this type of positions are not going to be able to provide the best type of service. They are going to be more exposed. So in the end, this depends on the maturity of a company, and all companies should reach the point in which they realize they need to have this position. Otherwise, they will have to assume the risk of suffering cyber attacks. And it's a matter of functions, true. There are, regarding organization and structures, there are going to be companies in which the roles of this position will be distributed in different people, or some of them are going to create a team, because it's true that a CISO it's not only a person, it's a person that depends on many departments. I want to ask the same question to Paco and Eva. Do you think you are trendy in your organizations? Do you feel like you are like an advisor of the company? Well, I'm also the data protection delegate, so it's true that I'm very involved in different projects. It's true that companies are more and more aware of security, and this means that when companies start working on different projects, they usually take into account the security approach. But it's true that we still have a long path to follow. It's true that we are still far away from this 25%, but we are on the right way, I think. The problem is also that the society, that universities, that companies still are not that interested in cybersecurity. We can understand that cybersecurity has an impact on companies, but also on people. Well, I think that if companies usually don't think that security is one of their goals, of their objectives. They have a person that is providing security services. So in the end, companies are going to look for our services depending on the awareness level they have on security. It's true that I have more and more work. They want my advice more and more, but it's true that we still are far away from covering all the security needs that an insurance company may have. You've said something very important, because it's true that security has a value when it is not understood as a parallel process from the business. It must be considered as part of the business. I wanted to ask Pablo, what are the consequences for the CISO, the Information System and Networks Directive? Well, the consequences, first of all, I'm going to start from the beginning. The Royal Decree has an article that is going to be devoted to CISOs. In the last draft of the Royal Decree, we already had this article, a specific article that in the end is not part of the final Royal Decree, but there is an article that mentions the need of having a CISO. So what are we doing now? We are trying to define the CISO position in an article. We have two perspectives here. On the one hand, we can think, should we indicate very specifically the roles of the CISO? Should we do it in a less strict way? Should we take into account the training that a CISO should receive? So this is the challenge we must face when creating regulations. So I think that, of course, this is important, that there is a regulation that talks about the CISO, but we need to be smart enough to add some regulations that can contribute to the work of CISOs. And we need to include these three pillars: organization, organizational chart, training, and role or functions. And the position in the organizational chart is very important because it's going to have an impact in the capacities of a CISO. And also training is really important, but it's true that there is not an educational background, specific educational background established for CISOs, but we must take all these things into account. We should decide if we want to make a more or less strict regulation, and this is the challenge we must face. But it's true that we need to be smart enough to do something that is helpful and efficient. Paco, do you think that we could contribute to the regulatory development? Well, we've always contributed to this, and we are lucky enough because we are listened to. I think our voices matter, so this Royal Decree, does it involve more risk or more opportunities? I think there are more opportunities than risks. It's true that we always have these scenarios in which some companies want to be more regulated, other companies want to be less regulated. But in my personal opinion, this is going to help us because the cybersecurity world is not very well, it's not that mature at the global level to say that we don't need regulations. So I think that this is going to be really helpful, not only for CISOs, but also for the society in general. And this is also going to depend on the level of maturity of companies, because it's true that critical infrastructures are always involved in this debate, but critical infrastructures are supposed to have mature enough processes and proceedings. So it's important to understand, too, that the scope of these regulations is going to be wider. So if you have certain structure, you will be able to solve these issues faster. And in the end, we all think that notifying security breaches is good for everyone. First, because you are stating a real situation, you don't have to try to hide it. And in the end, this is better for everyone, and everyone can cooperate and collaborate to work on this.
De nada. Yo quería destacar que en este camino y el libro es un ejemplo, pero también
So I wanted to mention
se está
that we are already working with some models that have been used in the private model, which is really good because this is related with what you were saying. We don't want to force organizations to change things that are already working, and this is what we've been trying to do until the new royal decree is implemented. 2 weeks ago, the state of California passed the first Cybersecurity Act in IoT. In this act establishes a new reasonable security criteria. We will have to see how this is going to be interpreted. We have to remember that the act is just one piece of paper. Well, because Americans are really go straight to the point always. But, well, it talks about the passwords on devices, and it says that the manufacturers need to implement some reasonable levels of security that can be further developed through patches, etc. Would we do this too? Yes, I think this is going to happen also here in Spain, and we will even go beyond that. Well, I'm sure that analysis will be included too. So what's very important is that I was before in the entrepreneur hall before, and I think it's very important to say that every service or product must have security and privacy. This is really important. So it will come a point in which this is going to be a standard everywhere. But we can wonder, but the thing is that we don't know if something is going to happen before that, because we are going to have millions of devices connected to internet in a few years. And how many devices have security in these devices? All companies are interested in security, but some analysis regarding IoT have shown that not even 5% devices have security. They don't even have some basic levels of security, such as patches. So we will reach that point, but we don't know when. So thank you very much, because you've been very efficient. And now we have 10 minutes for the audience to participate. If you want to ask any question. Good morning. I'm CEO of Red Team. I'm kind of against the CISO's activities, but what do you think the role of the CISO is more a vertical position or a horizontal position? For me, CISOs have a horizontal role because they need to be in all departments, business areas, technical areas. They also are going to participate in different projects of the company. So these positions should have a horizontal approach within the company or within several companies. This is going also to help to create some synergies. Jordi is my colleague, and we are working in the same position. And I think we are used to this type of way of working. But I know that in other companies, they are organized in a different way internationally, and the approach they have is more vertical. But for us, a horizontal approach is really important. And, well, CISO is good to have this type of figure, but in the end, the whole security information department needs to have this role, needs to be behind this role. I completely agree. In fact, well, we are always talking about multidisciplinary and holistic approach, and this means that we have to cover problems from the beginning to the end, and in the end, business processes start and end, but they need to start taking into account security, and they need to end taking into account security. So I'm talking about risk analysis in the beginning and measures at the end. So this is a cross-cutting approach for the whole company, and this is also a challenge for the CISO. They need to have time to talk, to be able to be in contact with all departments. In fact, I think we should end with having different sections, divided sections in companies, because CISOs must be involved in everything. And we feel more comfortable talking about cybersecurity managers, because this is going to allow for these employees to create synergies, and they are going to be able to manage different things in the same company. Well, cybersecurity is true that that is a concept that is running short, and Gartner has changed, in fact, the definition of cybersecurity, because it's true that cybersecurity, it seems that it's only related to the internet, to the virtual world, but it's true that the physical world is more and more related to the cyberspace, the virtual world, and digital officers and CISOs always try to say that digital transformation is one thing and that the rest of the problems should be solved by IT. But if we call this digital security, then everyone is going to feel involved in this field. So security must be integrated in the digital environment. And yeah, and this is why sometimes this position must be outside the IT department. You can call it as you want to, but we must make this clear. Yeah, but names are important too, because sometimes, and because this can create also some controversies within a company. More questions, Elena? I wanted to ask if you think that being called CISO was a disadvantage for us within the IT/OT world, and don't you think that the name Chief of Information Security Officer is running short? Pablo has already answered to this question, and you have confirmed it. So maybe we should make a survey to see how to call it Digital Security Officer, maybe. Well, I completely agree with her, because it's true that I think the name Chief of Information Security Officer doesn't cover all of the functions of this position, because in the end, you are dealing with many other things, and these should be named differently. It's true that CISO looks very good, but when you define what you're doing, I don't think I'm only a Chief of Information Security Officer. I think I do much more. So we will try to see how to call it. This is why Gartner has redefined this concept regarding, and is taking now into account the IT/OT world, the cyberspace. They acknowledge that this position goes beyond the name, and they are starting calling it digital security. Maybe we could even change the name of the CISO every 6 months, because the tasks involved in this position are increasing. So maybe we have to keep on developing the position. We need to take a qualitative leap. I think that's needed from my point of view. Digital risk, technology risk, this is also involved in the role of the CISO. Are there more questions? Okay, so then I think we can finish this panel 4 minutes in advance. Thank you so much for sticking to the time. Thank you all for attending this panel. I would like to invite you to download the white paper, and if, in case you have some opinions or improvements for the second edition, please let us know. You can write to ISMS Forum or INCIBE. Thank you very much.